Today is Saturday, October 29, 2022. The time is 10:30 p.m. and it is the 4th of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan in the year 5783. And we always have to go by the Hebrew calendar whenever we're looking at what time it is or what day it is, because we have to remember what is the goal. What are we doing all of this for? What's the purpose of Torah? What's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of the mitzvot? What is life? We have to keep constantly reminding ourselves, what are we doing all of this for? The year 6000 is the prophesied deadline for the arrival of Mashiach. Mashiach is the Messiah. But he can come sooner. The redemption era is something that has the potential to come every second. Mashiach can come tomorrow. He can come today even. That's what the whole thing with Chabad and we want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach right now. And we can have Mashiach any moment. However, this 6000 is kind of like a preventative measure in case we fail to do our job, in case we don't succeed in bringing the Messiah voluntarily. Because there's two opposing experiences to the light. One of them is with ease, and one of them is with hardship. One of them is with pleasure and mercy and kindness of God, and the other one is with the judgment, with the power, the strength, I don't want to say it a punishment, but a punishment means that there's someone punishing when really we're punishing ourselves. If you think about it, punishment and reward is just cause and effect. You put something out into the world, you try to, as Jordan Peterson says, you try to twist the fabric of reality, but you can't twist the fabric of reality. So it's going to snap back. If not right away, then 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. You bring about your circumstances all the time. You are always the cause of your circumstances. The soul that's coming down in the body that it comes down in a specific incarnation, in a specific life, is coming with baggage. It's coming with a history. It's coming with a journey that it just came from. And this is the landing point. This is the current moment that the soul is progressing forward in its journey. So there's so much more to life than what meets the eye. And that's why we need to really look into the Torah and not take things at the surface value, right? The Torah has 4 different depths that you can analyze the text. One of them is called pshat. Pshat means simple or literal. Those are all the stories in the Torah. Then you have remez, which is more secrets. It's kind of in between the lines. You're looking at things that are not necessarily so apparent by just taking the story at face value. And then you have something called drush. Drush is the homiletical interpretation of the text of the Torah. That's the midrash, for example. It's things that's really, you have to get a deeper sense of the Torah. That's things that you can't just see it by even looking between the lines. You have to have the key to a certain door and look behind it in order to have access to that information. And then we have sod. Sod means confidential. It means mystical, secret. This is the 4th and final level of depth analysis. Now, before I go even any further and explaining what all of this behind me is, we have here what seem like 10 circles, a number line, a percentage line from 0 to 100. What is all of these things behind me? We'll get there in 1 second. But first, we have to find out what is the meaning of life. The entire study of Torah and Kabbalah is really about finding out what is life. And is discovering the different ways and the different degrees to which you can understand the meaning of life. So, what is the fundamental difference between a non-living organism and a living organism? Like, for example, a stone, or a mineral, or a rock. There's one fundamental difference that differentiates living things from non-living things. Of course, that's life. But what is it? What is the difference? What is the difference between life and non-life? See, a mineral doesn't grow. A tree grows. A grass grows. A blade of grass grows. A flower grows. Fruits grow. Now, in the scientific world, they call it living things and non-living things. If you really want to go there, according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, everything is a living thing. Everything is alive. in a different way. It means different things to different things. But if we're going to look at the meaning of life, and we just discovered that, the main difference between a living thing and a non-living thing is the fact that living things grow. Well, right there we have the meaning of life. That is the fundamental meaning, definition of the word life. It's growth. Life is growth. Life is all about growth. It's all about wins and losses, right? Risks and rewards. Everything is about changes in time and progressions and trying to achieve something. Everything is about achievement. Everything is about overcoming something, right? Getting through the day, getting through the year, right? So we have to understand this system that we have here is called Etz HaChaim. It's called the tree of life because life is like a tree. Life is like a tree. A tree has 4 stages. First, there's the roots, and then you have kind of the trunk and the branches, and then you have the leaves, and then you have the fruits. This is kind of the way that life is. We have roots, branches, roots and branches. Everything is about roots and branches. What is roots and branches? Like we have a tree, and then we have the roots, and then we have the tree. The tree would be the branch, right? And then on the tree grows branches. Like here we have branches, we have branches, we have branches, we have branches. And then on those branches we have branches. We have leaves, we have flowers, we have beautiful designs. And then from those flowers we have branches. They're called fruits. They're called like we have apples, we have all of these food that are growing on this tree. So everything is about roots and branches, which is another way of saying that everything is about cause and effect. Everything is about cause and effect, right? Before and after. If we're talking about before the universe, meaning before time, then there is no before and after, but there is cause and effect. That tells us that cause and effect is the fundamental method of change. That is the meaning of distance, difference, separation. It's always through a change in form. If there was no motion, let's say, everything was just frozen, that means that time is also frozen. Because time and space are one. If you don't have any motion, then you don't have any progression of time. Mathematics is the language of nature. It is the communication system of the natural world. These 10 sefirot, which we're going to explain in a second, are the fundamental building blocks of life. When we look at the natural world, when we're analyzing the way that forces interact with each other, cause and effect, planetary systems, gravity, everything requires mathematics. We need numbers. Well, what are the fundamental numbers? 0 through 9. 0 through 9. That's exactly what these sefirot are. See, the sefirot are numbers. The sefirot represent values. The first one is called Keter. Keter represents the number 0. The number 0 is really meaning nothing. It means nothingness. The number 0 isn't actually a number. It's the absence of a number. It's the absence of anything. It's complete nothingness. Nothingness. In Hebrew, we call that Ein. That means nothingness. Nothing. Now, would we say that Keter is the root or the branch? Keter would be a root. Because if these emerge from 0, if these numbers start from 0, meaning when you start a timer, what number does it start from? 0. It goes 0, 0, and then 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And then in between 0 and 1, you have another 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then in between 1 and 2, you have another 10. You see, within the number 1, 0.0, exists 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, all the way up to 0.9, and then eventually reach 10, which is 1.0. The number 1 consists of 10 basic categories. If you look at the natural world, everything is numbers. You are even a number. Everything is a number. And by the way, that's another way of saying everything is energy. If something exists in the physical world that we're currently living in, it exists in one of 4 categories. Either it exists in the mineral state, either it exists in the vegetative state, the animal state, or we have the human level. That's the 4th level. Now, watch how it differentiates between human and animal. It differentiates between animal and vegetation. And it differentiates between vegetation and the mineral. Existence is a hierarchy of spiritual emanation. If we look at the first letter, we have Aleph. If we look at the middle letter, we have Mem. And then the last letter is Taf. Aleph, Mem, and Taf. The word means truth. Emet. Emet means truth. It means from Aleph, Mem to Taf. It's just existence. If you know binary code, for example, if you're in computer science or you like to program, we know that false means 0. True means 1. That's binary code. Everything is 1s and 0s. There is an infinite spectrum to reality. Meaning there's different levels to existence. 0, we said, is Keter. Keter means crown, by the way. Crown. We're going to see why it means crown in a second, but hold that thought. 0 is nothingness. Nothingness. Nothing. False means nothing. 0 means nothing. So, on a spectrum from 0 to 100, by the way, I only put 100 because we have increments, so that means that we have 1, 2, 3. But really, 100 means 1, right? Whenever you have a percentage, you have a certain value on the numerator out of 100, right? Which is how you get the percentage. Let's say we get a certain thing, we get X%, right? So if I put 5, we get 5%, right? That means 5 out of 100. But how do you write that in numerical form? 0.05. 0.05. So 0.05 would be somewhere above 0 and below 1. That's definitely what we know. I'm going to write the number 1 over here. 1. God is not 1.0. God is 1 means that He is oneness. Not in the numerical sense. That was what was so special about Abraham the patriarch. He was the first person to recognize the oneness of God, the unity that exists in the spiritual worlds. But if we take a spiritual entity, like a cup, let's just say like a cup, just so you can understand it, and you move it from point A to point B, according to the logic of the spiritual realms, it's still in point A, but now it's also in point B. And if you move it to point C, it's in all 3 spots. See, in the spiritual worlds, change is really just addition. A difference in form brings about a new form. It doesn't replace the old form. So, what does that mean, really? Why is that relevant to us? Because we realize that we're living in the world of illusion. Time is an illusion. Time is really the experience of motion. Because whenever something moves in an interval of space, let's say you have a 3-dimensional object, like a marker, and it's moving. I'm moving it. This is traveling across 4-dimensional space. That's called time. Time and space are the same. But this has been known for the past thousands of years. Really, this is in the books that are in Jewish mystical tradition. The wisdom of God existed from the beginning, meaning from the first man, which is Adam. Aleph, Daled, Mem spells the word Adam. Adam ends with the letter mem, and it's a final mem. We have two types of mem. We have the regular mem, which is spelled like this. And then we have the final mem, which means that whenever this letter falls at the end of a word, it's drawn as a square. Interesting, right? What is a square? What is God trying to tell us? What is the Hebrew language trying to tell us about a man that it ends with a square? What does a square represent? So let's draw a square and try and understand what it is. The square has four sides. Interesting, very interesting. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. It has four vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is four corners. And they also create four angles. 90-degree angles at that. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And if we connect the sides through the middle, we get four worlds. We have 3, 4 quadrants. Interesting. And then let's take a look at this. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 middle points. Meaning we have 5 centers. But then there's there's all of these in between those. And then in between those, and then in between those. So there's infinite levels of 4s. You understand? Because in between these, you now have all of these quadrants. Look at this. And then if you keep going even further, you have more 4s. You have more worlds. You have infinite worlds in a square. But I still don't understand what this has to do with what we're talking about. What does it have to do with Adam? What does it have to do with man, a human being? So, in order to express that, we have to look at the angles. We have 4 90-degree angles. So 4 times 90 degrees gets you 360 degrees. 360 degrees is a circle. A circle is eternal because it has continuity. You see? There are no points, there are no vertices, there are no sides, there is no end, there is no difference. There is nothing more symmetrical than a circle. It's more symmetrical than all of the shapes. It's even on all sides. A square is not even on all sides. A square can be like this, it can be like that, it can be all of the ways. But doesn't this apply to all the shapes? Like a triangle or a rhombus? Why are we talking about a square? Doesn't a triangle also have a complete form? Isn't it a complete shape? It only requires 3 sides, not 4. Why are we fixated on the square? Well, let's talk about this one. It's very, very interesting. Let's take a right triangle. A right triangle has 3 sides, 3 angles. Very nice. If we take this, it says 90 degrees. Very good, very good. If we say this one, we have also to split the 90 in half because it's a right triangle, which means it's 45 and 45 on both sides. What does that get us? 180 degrees. 180 degrees is half of 360 degrees. So a triangle can only see half of the picture. A triangle is not complete. A triangle doesn't represent completion in the same way a square does. A square really encompasses the circle. It gets the point. There's 4 worlds, there's 4 angles. There's the positive of the negative, there's the positive of the positive, there's the negative of the negative, and there's the negative of the positive. There's 4 different perspectives, just like a coordinate plane. If we look at a coordinate plane, we have 4 quadrants, like in mathematics, right? This is called origin, which is 0, 0. But if you go in this direction, you're going plus. If you go up, you're also getting plus. If you go left, you're going negative. If you go down, you're also getting negative. So north, south, east, west. Those are the four directions. These are the four angles. These are four worlds. This represents completion. The number 4 represents completion. And to make everything wrap together so beautifully, what happens when you add another triangle to this triangle? What happens when you add another 180 degrees to create a perfect square? What do you get? You get 360 degrees again. You get 180 times 2, which is 360 degrees. So the moral of this lesson that I wanted to show is that the square represents completion. It represents the four worlds. This in Kabbalah is known as Asiyah, Yetzirah, Beriah, and Atzilut. The four spiritual worlds. The four different planes, the four different dimensions that exist right here, in this world. They're not somewhere else. The spiritual worlds aren't in heaven. Heaven is here. Man has the ability to connect and draw down the energy, the light of the spiritual worlds. It's the only form of life that's able to do that. We have just played around with a bunch of shapes, angles, and numbers, but this is all the wisdom of geometry. In fact, Kabbalah deals with the wisdom of geometry in understanding the meaning of life. Everything is mathematics, and that's what's so beautiful about this all, because these 10 Sefirot are the numerical value system. Every number comes from 0 through 9. This is the tree of life. That means this is the organization of life. What's a tree? A tree is a structure. It's an organization. It's a diagram. It's an image. It's a graph. That's why it's called tree diagram. It's a chart. This is a map of life. This is the map of life. Without numbers, without math, there's no hope in understanding anything. You can't relate to anything. You can't measure anything. You can't count. You can't have time. You can't have denominations. You can't have degrees. You can't have intervals. You can't have differences. Difference, change, distance, separation, evolution. You won't be able to understand gravity. You won't have any mathematical equations. You won't be able to measure your height. You won't be able to measure the world. There would be no intervals. There would be no degrees. There would be no locations. Nature is built by math. Everything is numbers. The world is designed. Do you understand the precision that went into the sun being the perfect distance away from the earth? And without these 10 values, 0 through 9, there is no life. There is no difference. Because math is the way that was made possible. Remember how we said there's 4 worlds? But Keter corresponds to the world called Adam Kadmon. Kadmon means primordial. It means it existed from the beginning. All the way from the beginning of time. Not even time, before time. Before everything was even emanated. We have something called nothing. Ein, spelled by Aleph, Yud, Nun. Ein. That's, by the way, the word that's used in the kabbalistic reference to God. Ein Sof. Ein Sof. Meaning no end. Endless. Ein Sof is spelled Aleph, Yud, Nun, Samech, Vav, Fe. Ein. Ein Sof. Now the Ein Sof is basically a way to understand God because He is endless. There's no end. Ein means no, Sof means end or tail. So there's no tail, there's no end, there's no limit, there's no boundary, there's no vessel, there's no capacity, there's no measurements, there's no numbers. You see, there is no measurements, there's no math involved. Meaning you cannot mathematically equate the value of God, because He is above that. He is above the system that He created that's known as nature, that's known as life. He is the source of life. He's very much alive, but He doesn't have numbers. Because if you have a vessel known as the creation, that means automatically you have a capacity, you have measurements, you have a frame, you have borders. That's what a vessel is. Now, what is light? What is light? Light is like pleasure. But let's not go to some definition like that. In our world, what is light? In nature, what is light? The sun, what does it emanate? Light, heat, rays. Do we connect to the sun, or do we connect to the rays of the sun? We connect to the rays of the sun. If we connected to the sun, well, we would first of all burn up to a crisp. Which is the same thing about God, by the way. If we saw God, if we understood God, we can't live. We would have to die. Because anytime we use a word to describe something spiritual, for example, light or vessel, there's a reason that word was chosen to describe that concept. Meaning, light is something we understand in this world, in the natural, physical order that exists in nature. The sun emanates something that's called light. Visually, we can see it. Internally, we can feel it. It's heat, right? We can connect to the rays of the sun. But can we connect to the sun? Are we connecting to the sun? Indirectly. We're connecting to the light of the sun, really. That's really what we're connecting to. So the same thing with God. If we connected to the sun, we would burn up into a crisp. And look at how much heat is emanating from that star that even just by looking at it, a person can go blind. Don't take this out of context and say that I said go worship the sun. Don't worship the sun. However, the analogy of God is much like the sun. The sun emanates rays. It emanates light. And we benefit from the rays of the sun. All of life is only possible because of that light. Meaning that the absence of light causes a deterioration of life. It causes you to go in the direction of death. Meaning when the Torah says choose life, He's saying connect to my light. Connect to my energy. Connect to my rays. That's called or. And specifically it's called or Ein Sof. The reason it's called or Ein Sof is because or means light, Ein means no, and Sof means end. Together, endless light. The sun itself is not infinitely large, right? There's a certain capacity. There's a certain size, measurement. So the sun itself is also not endless, but that's why I said don't take it literally. It's more of a metaphor to explain the spiritual concept that God is emanating light. Light is also analogous for truth, wisdom. Everyone in the world, whenever they think of darkness, they think of the dark side. What do you think that the darkness is in reference to? Why is it called darkness? Why don't you just call it evil? Darkness means absence of light. If you're in a room and the lights are off, there's no lights, that means that you're left with darkness. The fulfillment of this vessel is the light that's inside it, or the water, if you want to say. If you have an 8-ounce cup and you go underneath a waterfall, it doesn't matter if there's an infinite amount of water coming down. There's so much water waiting for you. There's an abundance of water. But if you only have an 8-ounce cup, you will only ever be able to fit 8 ounces. But what are your options here? You want to grow. The purpose of life is growth, like we said at the beginning. So what can you do? Well, you have a few options. The first option is very beautiful. The first one is you can get that cup full of 8 ounces of water and you can pour it into other cups. You can fill up other vessels. The second option is to get a bigger cup. Go and create a bigger vessel. Expand the vessel. Make it have a greater capacity to receive. So that way you can fulfill it with more than 8 ounces. You can maybe have 12 ounces, 16, maybe even 32, maybe even 220,000 ounces. It depends on the size of your vessel. So the vessel is an example to express a soul. The vessel is a soul. The vessel is also a body. The vessel is also the creation, the world. It's also the name of God. It's also the name of you. A vessel is anything that has a meaning. Anything that has a meaning. So, for example, if you have these, they each have a word to describe them and they each have a meaning. So these are 10 vessels. Or letters. Letters mean something. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. So these are also vessels. And so we have a certain capacity for that light. And we want to receive that light. So it needs to be given, or we need to draw it down from above by invoking a desire to receive that light. But if I fill up my cup with the wrong things, and let's say I fill it with a bunch of junk, I don't have any space to receive that light. So first I need to empty my emotional baggage. First I need to go to a therapist, get my emotional and mental life sorted out, and then I can really start to learn how to connect and how to receive. You need to find out how to expand your vessel. You have to learn how to grow and how to make space for more of God into your life. You have to make room for God. So that's going to be all for tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.